south of the border, down Mexico way. That's where I fell in love when the stars above came out to play. And now as I wander...
Hello there, all you expat wannabes. I'm Johnny Mueller, and you're listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America, the show that tells you just what it's like to live, work, play, and or retire down here in Latin America. It's a mix of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great, and it's all right here, so let's get started. All right, today we'll be going off the grid and solar again. This would be part 6 of our continuing saga on how expats and gringos get the hell off the grid permanently, or at least as much as they possibly can. But first, let's talk about another favorite subject of gringos and expats, healthcare here in Latin America. It's very important once you get down here to have good doctors, clinics, and hospitals, right? Now, you always hear me say those national healthcare systems in Latin America, and every country's got one. Well, no matter what good things you may have heard about them, there's always an order of magnitude more bad than good that some people will never tell you about. I mean, come on, isn't it a great PR lure for a country to say, hey, come on down, you gringos and expats. We know you've got money and resources and create jobs and such. We know that most of you who come down are mature, older adults, a lot of you who are on a pension or Social Security and such. So medical costs and treatments are a big concern for you. You're looking for good but cheap healthcare. Who isn't? You know, I've seen so many glossy pamphlets in Latin government bureau tourist offices saying something like, Gringo, amigo, have we got a deal for you? Come on down and we'll sign you up with our national healthcare system. It's cheap, it covers everything, and they've got offices, doctors, and hospitals in every city. Well, you hear that kind of babble and see those pamphlets coming out of government offices in Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador, sometimes even in English, all saying pretty much the same thing and targeted towards the gringos and expats they see filtering in. Come on down, amigos, and take advantage of our cheap and excellent national healthcare system. Well, you know, they're half right. In one respect, it's true. It's not exactly cheap, but man, it will not put a dent in your pocketbook. The point is, Latin American governments, like governments everywhere, are bold-faced liars, yeah? Bold-faced, not bald-faced. You know, I had an English teacher way back when who said, if you tell a lie with a bold face, people are more likely to believe it. Makes sense. More sense than a bald-faced liar would. Anyway, in almost every case, Latin American national healthcare systems are beyond hit and miss, practically medieval-like, though they will remodel them once in a while and bring them up to snuff. That's when they do the photo ops. Then they're good for a while, a year or two. Shortly thereafter, the money runs out or gets stolen, they go bankrupt. Then, sin vergüenza, without a hint of embarrassment, they're back to telling the doctors to bring their own gloves, needles, and disposables. Think I'm exaggerating? Well, at my Expat Insider seminars, I always show this slide that's from a government hospital. There's a sign in the doctor's lounge that says, please bring your own syringes, gloves, and disposables because we ran out. That's an actual sign in the doctor's lounge of a big national healthcare hospital. That's no fluke either. And to jam that point home even further, I want to read something to you. I'd like to thank Mike, one of my Expat Insider Seminar alumni, who sent me this article from Mexican News Daily. Title of the headline, of the 13 ambulances assigned to Mexico's biggest national healthcare hospital, only 2 of them have gasoline. Really long title, but there you have it. All right, I'll read on. It says, Mexico's bankrupt healthcare service is not reimbursing ambulance drivers for the gas they purchase out of their own pockets. It goes on to say, nearly all of the ambulances at Mexico City Hospital for government employees are out of service. You'll see perfectly good ambulances parked outside Dario Fernandez General Hospital, and they won't be moving anytime soon. They're dead in the water, according to the drivers who are requesting anonymity. Furthermore, sources reveal that driver's license renewals are frequently delayed for ambulance drivers whose papers must be in order, and travel allowances are never reimbursed. Said one driver who wished to remain anonymous, before there was a mileage chart that we would check. That's how we knew what we were being reimbursed per trip. But they changed it on us, and now, in theory, they give us a travel allowance for every trip, but in the last 6 months, we have paid money out of our own pockets for gas, food, etc., and no one's been reimbursed for anything. Not for 6 months. However, the drivers say the lack of gasoline is not the only problem, nor the only reason for the vehicles being parked and immovable. Drivers are saying their papers and licenses are not up to date. Many expired, though the National Healthcare System, ISSTE, is supposed to pay for those expenses. Then the drivers say we can't risk going on emergency calls without our papers in order in case we get in an accident or pulled over by the police. If there's an accident, nobody's going to back us up and we'll have to pay. So we just don't take the chance. Then it says when the finance director for the National Healthcare Agency in Mexico was contacted, he revealed that the entire Mexican national healthcare system is essentially bankrupt and will run completely out of cash by July 2019. Then what? Well, no one knows and no one's talking about it. Oh, and this is important. When you get private healthcare insurance in Latin America, they'll always include some kind of ambulance service. That's part of the deal. And that's a good thing, a very good thing, meaning private, not public ambulance service. And you'll notice when you're down here as an ambulance passes, you'll see a kind of a 911 system too. It might not be 911, but there'll be an emergency ambulance number. And when you call that, believe it or not, you'll actually get through because cell service is great down here. And those private ambulance companies are hooked into the system too, so they're going to be the first responders because they get paid. They're working for an insurance company or a big private hospital group. Yet another great reason to get private health care insurance here in Latin America. Though I know there are some gringos and expats, especially the ones in their 20s and 30s who think they're going to live forever, they're invincible, they won't get health care insurance, and when something happens, since they're going raw, they're paying out of pocket. But still, even if you don't have insurance, it's dirt cheap. You pay a quarter to a fifth of what you'd be paying up in the States. The question always is, which hospitals, clinics, and doctors are good ones? Which ones should you be checking out? You don't want to do that after you've stepped in a pothole, fallen down the stairs, or been hit by a tuk-tuk. And then you have to ask yourself, which ambulance service might you want to use? Well, if you're on a private insurance plan, all that'll be taken care of for you. So, by all means, try to get yourself some private medical insurance. And usually a gringo or expat under 60 years old should be able to pick up a really good health plan for around $100 a month. And if you're under 50, probably $75 a month. Now, some private plans will take you from 65 to 70 years old too. You just have to check those out with a broker. Of course, we'll be discussing that and much more at the Expat Insider Seminar in July. And when you're there, we can even help you hone in on a couple of plans for yourself if that's what you're interested in. All right, enough said about that. Let's talk just a minute or two about some other hot news topics that'll surely make you think about what's happening with all the immigration problems you're having up in the States right now. This comes out of Peru, which has a population of 32 million and the second biggest population of Venezuelan immigrants after Colombia. Now, considering Peru only has 32 million people, there are 700,000 Venezuelans who came to Peru just in the past year. And Peruvian officials are saying that about 1 in 20 people, about 5% of the people in Peru, are Venezuelans in the country illegally because their temporary visas have lapsed, or they snuck in illegally, or they're simply Venezolanos without a permanent visa. And now, after extending a helping hand with the good neighbor policy, Peruvians are getting really pissed off. The majority will tell you Venezuelans have overstayed their welcome. Like any visitor or family member you welcome into your house, after a while, they get on your nerves and you just want them to get the hell out. Look at Julian Assange. I know he's an extreme case, but everyone who visited him at the Ecuadorian embassy in London said in time he changed from a well-respected, well-groomed guy to a kind of a stinky, slovenly, depressed couch potato. Aside from that, I actually think the guy is a kind of a hero myself. But I wouldn't want him to camp out in my guest room. Am I digressing? I thought so. Anyway, back to Latin America. In this article, we've got Peru's Interior Minister Carlos Moran saying many Venezuelans are now being expelled. One big reason is that many have been providing false sworn declarations on their residency applications. For example, saying they have no criminal record when they do, saying they've had no DUIs and they do, claiming they have relatives in Peru to stay with and they don't, claiming to be professionals with degrees and titles that they don't have, claiming resources and bank accounts in Peru that turn out to be non-existent. Problem is, so many tens of thousands of Venezuelans have been flooding in that it's impossible to vet everyone's entrance and immigration documents. Well, just 2 days ago, Interior Minister Moran told reporters that as a government we must protect our own citizens first. Their own citizens first. What a novel concept. Then he said, these people. Say what? Wow, can you believe that? He called them these people. Why, saying that's a big no-no. If you were up in the States, the SJWs would picket your house, maybe even whip your ass. Anyway, the Peruvian Interior Minister went on to say, these Venezuelans who have entered our country lying, falsifying information, and with criminal records, that's a threat to our own citizens, and we must deport them. Turns out, Moran's press conference on Monday followed reports in local media that in recent months, Venezuelan nationals have been involved in criminal rackets, gang activity, car theft, kidnappings for ransom. Kidnapping for ransom. Is there any other kind? Anyway, he goes on to say certain Venezuelans are involved in drug cartel activities, drug-related crimes, weapons crimes, etc., etc. Oh, and then he says, get this, unfortunately, Venezuelan migrants have ended up straining our public services. You think? Where have you heard that before? Then the article says, as of April 2019, polls have indicated that 67% of Peruvians now view Venezuelan immigration as negative for the country. Compared with polling results of February 2018, just over a year ago, only 43% of Peruvians viewed the Venezuelan influx as negative, with crime and delinquency among the Venezuelans listed as the top concern and major fears. And now, I'll throw in my 2 centavos. Speaking of older polls, done 1 to 3 years ago, when the Venezuelan influx wasn't so great, it seemed as if every single Latin American person I spoke to, except the very, very highly educated and people who own their own businesses, absolutely hated Donald Trump. For the usual reasons, his anti-immigration stance, wanting to build a wall and actually enforce immigration policies that have existed for years and years, but other presidents just didn't take too seriously. Well, you know, it's a funny thing. Just the other day, I was in an Uber. The Uber driver was from the Dominican Republic. And as usual, I'm usually way off the Gringo tourist trail, and I'll strike up a conversation with these guys in Spanish, especially on a long haul. You know what this guy told me? Every once in a while, he's talking to someone he picked up at the airport from Mexico, Costa Rica, Latinos from different countries in Latin America, and inevitably, Trump's name will come up, and he told me he's gotten into a number of arguments with passengers who diss Trump all through the ride, and then he'll say, you know what the Dominican Republic needs? A Donald Trump. First they'll laugh, thinking it's a joke. Then he'll say, no joke. We really need our own Latin Donald Trump. Then the passenger will blurt out, what are you saying? And the Uber driver will tell him, the exact same thing is happening in the Dominican Republic as is happening in the U.S. Only with us, he says, it's not the poor, uneducated Mexicans or Guatemalans or Hondurans sneaking in and bringing their bad habits with them. It's the dirt poor, uneducated Haitians sneaking into the Dominican Republic and bringing their bad habits with them. Because you see, the DR is about 4 times as wealthy as Haiti, and they've got a porous border. Sound familiar? Then he'd explain, if we had our own Latino version of Donald Trump, there'd be a strictly enforced immigration policy. The Haitians would have to have a reason or education to come to my country, and crime and delinquency would go way down. He said, just read the crime stats. They're in the papers all the time. Haitians commit 3 times as many crimes per capita than our own Dominican population. Then the Uber driver tells me that after he lays those facts on his passenger, a businessman from Panama, Argentina, Mexico, wherever, there's always a kind of a pregnant pause of silence, and they say, is that right? I didn't know that. Tienes razón. You have good reason there, or you might be right. That's because, you see, the Uber driver went on to say, you know, countries like Panama, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Mexico, Argentina have never had the problem of an influx of poor, uneducated people like we have in the Dominican Republic and the Gringos have up in the United States. And then he said, surprise, surprise, the mood in certain countries has changed in the last year. Now, when he picks up someone who's just flown in from Colombia or from Peru, when the subject comes around to the U.S. immigration and Donald Trump, guess what? The majority of Latinos from those countries are saying the same thing. We need a Latino version of Donald Trump in our country. In other words, we need a guy who will say Peru first, or Argentina first, or Panama first. Why? Because of the Venezuelan problem. And they have that opinion knowing that Venezolanos speak their language, and most of them are more educated than the people in the countries they're fleeing to. Yet, the Uber guy admitted that when he had that same conversation just a few years ago with passengers from Colombia and Peru and Panama, they'd say they absolutely despise Donald Trump. Now, as for me, Johnny, I read a lot of Latino op-ed pieces. In Spanish, of course. And day after day, you see more and more negative articles coming out. The authors lamenting the fact that so many Venezuelanos have been let into their countries. The locals are getting really pissed off. And remember, those are countries that do not have a welfare system. They don't have 64 giveaway programs for the poor and needy like they do up in the States. If the locals in the DR, Colombia, and Peru are pissed off now, imagine how they feel if they had a U.S.-style, really massive social welfare system they all could hook into. Anyway, I just thought you'd like to know what the vibe is on the street, which just goes to show if you want the lowdown in any particular Latin country, ask your Uber driver and read some of the local op-ed pieces. Of course, if you don't speak Spanish, you're SOL. By the way, about those op-ed pieces, it's pretty much a guarantee you're never going to see those kind of articles reprinted up in the States. Not the ones where people are saying, we need a Latin Donald Trump, that's for sure. And, although in those particular Latin countries where illegals are flooding in daily, where you'll hear even the man on the street talking that way, you're not going to see those articles reprinted up in the States anytime soon because they're way too un-PC and classist and racist and so offensive to all those snowflakes up in that great Latino barrio of California and all the other sanctuary cities. Yet, as one Greek philosopher once said, there's nothing more painful than being stung by the truth. Wish I'd have said that. Hey, I just did. All right, let's talk some more about Gringos going solar, going off the grid. Starting with this email from Canadian Jean-Luc, who does quite a bit of hanging in Mexico. He says, Johnny, thanks a lot for the shows about going off the grid. I listened to some of your previous ones on the subject too, and I love your insight. But why bother with all the hassle making your own solar system when you can have free electricity without even lifting a finger? Well, almost. You need just 6 inches of heavy gauge wire. Here's how. Just simply stop paying your electric bill completely and wait for a few months. They'll come over and pull your meter off. And voila. See the attached picture, please, to see how you can jump the meter with 2 wires and get free electricity forever. Almost. In other words, just running the juice directly from the pole into the house without a meter. Though with anyone from the electric company, it's pretty obvious because the meter's gone and he's placed a big-ass jumper there. And believe me, you don't want to try this at home. If you do, and a lot of Mexicans are doing it, how do you think I got this photo? Make sure all your breakers are switched off in your house or it'll be a gigantic spark when you put those bypass jumpers in. Even so, any kind of pirate patch like this is not recommended for the faint of heart. Then, Jean-Luc says, if the electric company finally realizes what happened, that you've been stealing power, they'll cut your wire at the pole. Then what do? Well, you do what every street taco vendor guy does at sundown. Run a wire to the post and steal it by shimmying up and connecting it from on high. Aha! A dangerous hack to be sure, but it works. By the way, me, Johnny, here. If you want to copy that picture, and I've got a picture of a guy shimmying up a pole doing it too, shoot me an email, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. Then Jean-Luc says, just fooling around, Johnny, you know that, but I see this all the time. Poverty is the mother of simple inventions. All right, thanks for that, Jean-Luc. Now for more on the business of solar. Where we last left off with the solar power stuff, we were talking about having to have around 5,000 watts of solar panels on your roof. Now, here in Latin America, most roofs are flat and made out of concrete. Concrete roofs, by the way, are the best type of roof to fasten solar panels to because, well, with hurricanes, earthquakes, gigantic storms, whatever, when fastened correctly to a concrete roof, your solar panels are not going to lift up, fly away, or get damaged unless, of course, a tree or your neighbor's house falls on them or something. Then all bets are off. Now, if you look at any of the photos or YouTube videos of the recent big hurricane in Puerto Rico, you'll see lots of roofs are gone. That's what happens to roofs that are mostly metal and fiberglass, the cheap way out. People with concrete roofs did not have that kind of problem. Luckily, most gringos in Latin America who build or buy a house have a concrete roof. But not so fast. You have to know a few things, and here's some tips to mounting solar panels on a concrete roof. Tip number 1, if you've got a flat roof, never mount your solar panels completely flat on that roof. Now, of course, the first step is to lay down the metal rails and racking. They're bolted into the roof, usually by a professional installer or your 14-year-old cleaning lady. Just checking to see if you're awake. This stuff can get boring, you know, especially for you female listeners who'd much rather hear about the latest Antonio Banderas sighting. Was that sexist? So what? Oh, and you might be wondering how rough and tough a solar panel really is. I mean, things fall on them all the time. Can they take it? Not just bird poop either. Well, what you probably didn't know is that solar panels are tested by dropping a certain size steel ball bearing from a distance of about a meter. That's a little over 3 feet. The fact is, if you look at solar panel installations 10, 15, even 20 years ago, you rarely see any damage, any cracks at all. But again, you don't want to mount them directly flat on a concrete roof. Even if you're on or near the equator, like in Ecuador, for example, where the sun is directly overhead, you have to tilt those panels at least 7 degrees. Can you guess why? Because they all have an aluminum rim around them that acts like a little raised window frame, so it collects water and dust, but they're self-cleaning if they've got a little tilt on them. Just 7 degrees is enough. I know. Some of you are thinking that most solar panels are tilted anyway, tilted towards the sun, depending on your latitude. In fact, you could go to the internet and look that up for wherever you are in a split second. But you know, the closer you get to the equator, the smaller the angle. In fact, I know an engineer who worked for Apple. He said one of the dirty little secrets they didn't talk about much was the fact that Apple put together a big solar installation at one of their development facilities on a flat roof, mounted flat as the horizon. And after 3 months, believe it or not, the solar power degraded by 30%. So how'd they fix it? Well, they couldn't tear all that stuff down and redo it. Too many hundreds, if not thousands, of solar panels. So they hired a perpetual cleaning crew. It was $1 million mistake. I wonder if anyone got fired. Duh. All right, now let's talk about guarantees on the parts of your solar system now. Of course, everyone wants the longest guarantee possible, as long as the company's still around and honors it. And with lithium-ion batteries and solar panels, there are some industry standard guarantees everyone kind of sticks to these days. Let's take solar panels. Let's make the numbers easy and say you have a 400-watt panel. The average guarantee works like this. After 10 years, they guarantee it'll be putting out 90% of its rated full value. So 400 times 0.9, 90%. It'll drop to no less than 360 watts in 10 years. But with panels, there's a double guarantee. They also have a 25-year guarantee. So when you buy a panel, you'll get 2 guarantees, a 10-year and a 25. The 25-year guarantee says that your panel will put out no less than 80% of its full rated wattage when it's 25 years old. So again, if you do the numbers on a 400-watt panel, 80% of that means it's guaranteed to put out no less than 320 watts at the 25-year mark. So in the end, to us, Gringos and Expats, what's that all about? What does it mean? And can you hold them to it? More importantly, is the company or even you and I going to be around in 25 years? Well, here it is. In a nutshell, you shouldn't give one hot damn about the guarantees. Why? Sure, the promises they make in those guarantees are going to hold up. But in just 5 years, you wait, we'll have certainly gone through another solar generation. They'll be so cheap and so small, you won't care about those old panels you bought 5 years ago. And after 10 years, you'll probably have already tossed them and are using the tiny, super efficient ones that don't look like panels at all. You'll see solar material incorporated right into the roofing material and on the hoods, roofs, and trunks of your electric cars. And in 25 years, with an 80% guarantee on those panels, who cares? By then, I'm sure they'll have clothes made out of some kind of solar fabric. And who knows, maybe even tombstones made out of solar material so you could have nighttime events in the cemetery. Bottom line, don't worry about guarantees on solar panels. Oh, and as far as prognosticating, how about this? I happen to know a guy in Germany, an engineer, who makes high-powered solar panels that are so thin they roll up like a roll of saran wrap. Like he said, pretty soon we'll be making solar wallpaper. And get this, solar paint. Even better, he sent me a link to a friend of his who works at another company in Germany. Yeah, Germany again. Ja, again with the Alemanen. Well, they've got a company, in fact, more than one company in Germany that are producing solar Persian blinds. So, if you live in an apartment complex and have no access to a roof and don't have a lawn or don't have a balcony, you just buy these window shades. And get this, they're self-tracking. If you put them in the tracking mode, the louvers will actually tilt to the best solar tracking angle. Now, admittedly, those things are expensive, damn expensive. New tech always starts out that way. Just remember, in a couple of years, they'll be Kmart cheap, and you won't care if you're on the 5th floor of a 20-story high-rise. Yep, you too can have solar power. But what about the heart of your solar power setup? That's your combined lithium-ion battery pack, inverter, charger, and control unit. Last time we talked about how it's an all-in-one unit now. Well, as it turns out, the guarantees for those things are all over the place. Some of the good ones, the best ones, won't give you a guarantee based on years. They'll give you a guarantee based on the total charge and discharge cycles of the battery. For example, one of the standard guarantees or warranty is they'll give you a 5 or 10-year guarantee on the electronics in the unit, plus a separate guarantee for the lithium-ion batteries, usually a 3,000 charge-discharge cycle. So beware of battery guarantees that say 500 or 1,000 discharge cycles. Go for 3,000 discharge cycles at least. So anyway, when you reach whatever limit, it's guaranteed to charge at least to the 80% of maximum value rating. So then how long will your battery be good for? How long will it last? Well, if you plan your system right, probably 15 to 20 years. But then again, in the next 10, maybe even 5 years, there's going to be another gigantic evolution with batteries. In the end, you shouldn't put a lot of weight in a guarantee, though. With a long guarantee, that means they've used heavy-duty commercial-grade electronics, which is a very good thing, especially if you're counting on your system during a calamity or grid down, which is highly possible, even probable. Now, you heard me mention that lithium-ion battery guarantees are all over the place, and that's kind of a mystery to me, since all the major solar power outfits use the same batteries from the top 5 or 6 manufacturers, either coming from Panasonic, LG, Toshiba, Tesla, and a couple of others. One of them being that massive Chinese bus company, BYD. All right, we're getting towards the end of the show now, but there's a lot more to say about setting up your own solar power system in Latin America. I hope I'm not boring the pants off you, but I've been getting a continuous string of emails from people asking me how to set up their own once they've got that Plan B in action. Oh, and speaking of Plan Bs and drinking from the fire hose, don't forget I've got that July 2019 Expat Insider Seminar coming up. The early bird specials are still in effect, so you'll save $500 off the regular price, but the time is limited on that. Just go to www.thenewexpat.com and click on Johnny's seminar link. While you're there, you'll find out how to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, that is, apply for your permanent or temporary residency in Guatemala at the same time you're at the seminar. And you'll learn all about the famous John Galt post-seminar trip, too. Just go to www.thenewexpat.com and click on the seminar link. You've been listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America. If you need some help with your own Plan B, you can schedule a one-on-one phone call with me. But first, download my free Plan B questionnaire at www.thenewexpat.com. Better yet, if you want to get your Plan B going from right up there in the States, just sign up for my 9-hour Expat Essentials course. Get the perfect Plan B blueprint by going to theexpatfiles.com/academy. Nos vemos.